NTP proudly presents the premier outdoor show in northeastern and central Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania Outdoor Life, your window to the great outdoors. Tonight on Pennsylvania Outdoor Life.
Cannon nets and deer research will take you in the field. Plus, we'll have the results of a scientific poll about the deer herd. And Dr. Gary Alt will be our special guest.
This week's show is ready to roll. Pennsylvania Outdoor Life starts right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pennsylvania Outdoor Life. I'm Don Jacobs, along with Ken Hunter, and we promised you last week a show dedicated to white-tailed deer research and some tough questions to the leading expert in the state about white-tailed deer, and that's exactly what we have here.
Yes, we do, and we have the leading expert right over here to my left. Dr. Gary Alt is here with us.
Gary, thanks for joining us again.
Thanks for having me here.
Now, today's program, Gary, of course, is entirely about white-tailed deer. And I know one of the big things we have going on right now is some buck research at Penn State. Can you kind of give us a quick update on what's happening?
Yeah, we're in the third and final year, and the trapping's going pretty well. We said we were going to radio collar 600 bucks. It's one of the largest studies ever done on whitetails in the wild, and we're wrapping it up probably in the next 30 days. We'll have reached that goal.
And it's been very interesting to watch this team progress from one way of trapping to come up with another, another. Now, how about the rocket nets? That's the one that we're talking about right now. In fact, when you start talking about netting deer, rocket nets in Pennsylvania have been used for 2 years now, and this is the first time we were invited out. Eric Long, in charge of the research going on out in State College, said, come on out, we'll show you how the rocket nets work. There you go.
This is a rocket net. This is the third trapping technique that we use to catch deer here. We've seen the clover traps and the drop nets before. And this is kind of adapted from what they use for turkey. It's most commonly used to catch birds, but it can be used to catch deer too. What we have here is a 40 by 60 foot net. The drop net's 70 by 70, so it's a little smaller than a drop net typically is. But we take the net and we'll line it up in a line here with 3 posts, and each post has a rocket. Attached to it is basically an explosive charge that is clamped basically to the projectile. The one end of the net is. The other end of the net is staked down to the ground, or weighted to the ground. So the leading edge of the net, when we have deer underneath or deer on the bait, which is in front of the net, we can fire a detonator, and the leading edge of the net will shoot up into the air and over the heads of the deer. Okay. The trailing edge of the net should stay close to where we launched it from.
How do you do that? Is that weighted then?
Yeah, it'll be weighted on the end. If the weight's not sufficient to hold it, in some situations we can actually stake down the trailing edge of the net. We'll curl up the net, we'll leave it setting here along the side. We'll have bait about 10 feet in front of it. Okay. We'll be sitting in the shed. We'll have a shot line, an electrical line that runs all the way down to the shed or wherever we're sitting to watch.
So this is it. This is the wire.
This is the wire that sets it off. So
this is the one Wile E. Coyote's been putting down.
That's right.
To catch the Roadrunner for
right.
years.
We buy this directly from Acme. So.
Well, yours works, right?
Yep. That's right. I hope so. Okay. So we got alligator clips that'll go to each charge here. Yeah.
There you go.
That's the end there. It's going to go down to the detonator.
Well, the last time we were together, you said this is the kind of weather that you guys like.
We love this weather, so
this helps bring the deer in.
That's right. Gets them hungry and
think that you're crazy, but
exactly.
It's a heck of a place to work.
Exactly. Yeah, we've got good cold weather this year and good snow covers, so it makes it a little harder for the deer, which makes our job easier because they're more willing to come into bait. So they'll risk a little bit more to get a good corn-fed meal. What we're planning on is hoping we get some deer coming out of the woods behind. They'll mill in. We'll hope to get a group of a few deer come in, get onto the corn. When the deer get on the corn and get their heads down, eating the corn, then we got the green light basically to fire the net. Okay. So we're going to have 2 people that'll be watching the deer at all times. One person's holding the detonator, and that's actually the button that you press, and that sends the charge through that sends the whole show starting. Okay. And the other person is basically a spotter. And what we're going to be doing is constantly in communication with each other. We see deer coming. Okay, deer are moving towards the corn. Once we get some deer on the bait and on the corn, the next thing we're looking for is to get all their heads down at once.
Right. Again, so you
This is
get
a
element of
safety
surprise.
thing. Exactly,
Right?
exactly.
Okay.
So when the deer's head's down and they're eating the corn, then we basically have an ability, that's our green light. So whoever's spotting will give a countdown. 3, 2, 1, go. At this point, we're loading up the charges. So once the charges get into the rockets, no one walks in front of the rockets again. So this is kind of, once we get them in, it's like a loaded gun.
Basically, that's gunpowder. Is that it?
It's all sorts of concoction, but it's, yeah, basically gunpowder. And then there's some other chemicals in there that respond to the electrical charge that starts the reaction, and then you basically have the explosives from there. I think it's actually solid rocket fuel is basically what we're using here. So the positive and negative wire gets threaded through one of the exhaust holes for the rocket. And then we got the alligator clips that go into the terminals at the end.
Dumb question about the weather or water doesn't bother.
It should be all right with this. Yep. Should be all right. There's some exhaust holes in the back here that you can see.
It is actually a rocket.
It is actually a rocket. It's an explosive charge, so it's quite dramatic when we get these to fire off.
And
So since this is wire clamped to the net, when it shoots,
like this.
exactly, it shoots and it carries that end of the net out.
Okay.
This end of the net stays put.
And hopefully deer are
And hopefully deer underneath it.
And of course, we have to thank Eric Long for inviting us down there. You know, Ken, he invited us down and he said, we will find deer underneath the nets. We got them when we dropped them. We will find deer in clover traps. We caught them when he invited us down. Now, will we work it out with the cannon nets? We'll have to wait and see.
Now, those cannons are something else. Gary, they're invaluable for wildlife research. How else have you used those things?
Well, they're used for, primarily they're used a lot for turkeys, and they adapted them for deer, and we actually used them on bear a little bit as well.
And you've been successful in all the cases?
Yeah, we've had, been able to catch wildlife in all of those.
Well, are we going to be successful? You'll just have to wait and see. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back for some cannon netting, so stick around.
Welcome back to Pennsylvania Outdoor Life. And of course, we are here with Dr. Gary Ault, and today's show is dedicated entirely to the white-tailed deer. Now, Gary, we're talking about the buck research that's going on right now. How many bucks do we have on air? How many of them are collared we're tracking?
They have a little over 150, and the goal is to have 200 on, so we're well along, 3/4 or more than we're out there, and that's the research that's going to allow us to learn whether antler restrictions work or not. Where do these deer go? Mm-hmm. One of the fascinating stories they told me the other day was about a buck that was born and raised in a certain area, had dispersed to a new area. Last fall, when the hunting got tough, he ran home. He ran home and he stayed there for the rest of the season.
Is that a short-term memory thing, or is it instinctual?
I don't know. But he survived, so apparently did the right thing.
Well, you know what? I am totally amazed on how this whole thing has progressed, on how they know what they're doing now out there, and especially when we're talking about the people in central Pennsylvania working with Eric Long. Now, let's head back out there and see if this whole canning netting idea is actually working.
Okay, here's a quick recap. The net is all rolled up and ready. The bait has been placed in front of the net. The rockets have been loaded, and the wire designed to ignite the charges is hooked up and ready for the buttons to be pushed. We climbed into a shed overlooking the area to wait for the deer to show up. The team uses night vision glasses, but our camera is pointed at the rockets when the signal is given.
We got deer. We got at least 3.
Now take a look at it again, this time in slow motion. Notice how all the rockets fire at once. The netting was successful. 2 deer were captured, and one of them a button buck.
Got 1 buck. Andy, help him out. Guessing you blindfold. Blindfold. You got blindfold? Yeah. Okay. We got Jake.
Button buck.
Excellent.
the deer are given tranquilizers, and when they calm down, the team begins the work.
Here, just take it easy for a second. Okay. This is a hole punch that we make to put the numbered ear tag in. Since we're making a punch in the ear, we keep the piece of skin and cartilage, and that's what we can use to run genetic analysis on.
That's a DNA sample?
Yep. So this will be doe number buck number 3074. On the back of these tags has a toll-free number. If a hunter harvests this deer, he can call the Game Commission. These collars in the rut, their neck's going to swell up. So you got to give a lot of room for expansion. So we built a specially designed elastic piece into the collar that will allow it to expand as they grow older. There's some stitches in there, and the stitches were made out of cotton, so they'll break down after a while, and then it's just like a pleat. And when those stitches break, the collar releases a couple inches. So you get a couple inches that way, and then you got the stretch in the elastic. It
Allows for growth.
allows for growth.
Is that radio up and going now?
This radio's up and going. So before we let them go, we make sure that our radio collar's working correctly. So this is his frequency. 7.012 is the frequency we have on the collar. Got it written down there so we can see it.
So he's online.
He's on. Since we hear him beeping, we know he's going to be transmitting for us. So we got a radio collar that's working well. Okay. Get a chest girth measurement on him.
Once the tags have been put on both deer, the radio collar is secured on the button buck, and all the information has been gathered. It's time to give the deer another shot, this time to wake them up.
So that's it.
That's it.
There's his buttons.
There's his buttons.
He's ready to be released for this day.
It'll be interesting to see what he turns out to be.
Isn't that cool?
If he's a spiker or a 4-point, hopefully make it through next hunting season, and then maybe see what he comes back as a 2.5-year-old buck. So.
All right.
Yeah. There he goes. Oop. A little wobbly yet. Turned out great. We got an adult doe and a button buck. We did have other deer coming in down behind them, but we wanted to take what we had on the corn right away because if too many deer packed the area, then it wasn't going to be safe to fire the rockets.
Right.
So, man, we got a mom and a fawn on here. You know, from where we're sitting, obviously we can't tell if it's got buttons or not, but we came up here, it was a button buck. We got another deer on the air.
All right.
Yeah, best case scenario.
Successful night.
Exactly.
Well, there you have it, and it's so nice when it works right, isn't it? Now you have to admit, they've been learning as they're going, so there's been failures, right?
Yeah, always.
And it's research, so you expect failures?
That's right.
We were out yet another day with them, and take a look at what happened. It was snowing, it was terrible. Take a look at this.
3, 2, 1, go.
You think? Nope. No, let's check it out in slow motion again. It's hysterical. We're sitting there waiting for this deer to be laying underneath the net, but when the snow cleared, you'll see it taken off, and you can just about see a bunch of other deer in the background there, and that deer is gone. I think he ended up 13 miles away. What do you say? I mean, you know, you're going into the woods, anything can happen, and you're teaching yourself as you go along. There's lessons to be learned, isn't there?
Well, there are, and I think, you know, the intention was to catch the deer. Of course, the deer's intention was to escape.
Right.
So sometimes we get the deer, and sometimes the deer gets us. But we've had experiences like this with turkeys and deer and bear, and one of them that comes to mind, one night we were at a landfill. We're firing a rocket net over this 500-plus pound bear. We fired this net over the bear, and he wasn't supposed to do this, but he took off running with the net. And he charged a D9 bulldozer, got up on the track, went on up into the cabin, and the net got tangled in the controls. He spun around and sat down in the seat of the D9 dozer. He looked like he was driving. I told the guy with me, I said, if he starts that dozer up, I'm leaving.
We're gone.
But we actually anesthetized it. I had to get it out of the cabin. So.
Oh, that is so funny.
I think the hallmark of a great research team is a team that never loses sight of what their goal is. And I think Eric and his team is fantastic in that regard, in that they have a mission. They have to catch 200 bucks, and they're going to do it. And what makes them great, as compared to being good, is that if they don't get them one way, they get them another way. And they're trying a whole bunch of different things. They're really going to the forefront of how do you get the job done.
And thanks for sticking us right in there amongst them, too.
Fortunately, it works more often than it doesn't work, Gary, but that's an interesting story. Well, we're going to go to a break here in just a minute, but when we come back, we have a survey that we've done here at WNEP on the deer program, and we're going to talk to some folks about it. They have some questions from the viewers. We're going to take a look at those later on.
Welcome back to Pennsylvania Outdoor Life. It seems like wherever you go, people are questioning, what are we doing with the deer herd? What are we doing with the antler restrictions? We actually started a Survey USA scientific poll with questions just to deer hunters, and here was the first question that went out last week. The first question on this Survey USA poll is, do you agree or disagree with the Pennsylvania's 3-point antler restriction? Not too surprising in my eyes are the results. And actually, 58% of the deer hunters in Pennsylvania that went through this survey agree with it. 37 disagree, and there's always a couple, 5% that aren't really sure about it. And this is plus or minus a 5% accuracy rate. So I have to turn to you now and say, you've got to be smiling. It seems like people like it.
Well, it certainly seems that way, and I think it's good to have scientific surveys done instead of just going down to Tom's Bar and Grill and say, what do you guys think? I mean, we do that too when we go out and we poll people across the state, but the scientific surveys are the way to go. We've had a variety of samples like that, and most of them are between half and 75%. So.
On the 3-point antler restriction question.
Yeah.
And you're seeing results. We're seeing huge racks all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Excellent. We have another question.
We have a second question we're going to take a look at. The second question is, do you agree or disagree with the direction the Game Commission is taking in managing the deer herd in Pennsylvania? And the results came up as follows, and you're going to see that if you consider the fact that there's about a 5 to 6% difference here of inaccuracy, that about 46% of the people agreed with it, and about 48% disagreed with it, and there's only a few that did not comment and weren't sure.
All right, well,
That's
I don't know.
about a wash, Jake.
And I'm going to say, because of that plus or minus 5%, I guess you'd have to call it a 50-50 split, right?
Yeah.
What do you say about a 50-50 split?
Well, I'll accept a 50-50 split. It's better than a 90-10
Right.
against.
Your glass is half full, is what you're saying.
Well, I think, we have to look beyond just the polls about what do people like, because whitetail deer management is a very contentious issue. And if you look at the history of deer management, not only in Pennsylvania, but throughout the eastern United States, I think a lot of states would be very glad to have 50% of the people in favor. It's kind of like telling kids they have to eat Brussels sprouts in order to do what's in the best interest of the resource. So part of it is to see, what do the people want to do, what do they like, how can we use this information to find out how can we build a better program that is more acceptable. The other part of it is leadership and stewardship. We have to do what's in the best interest of the resource. Sometimes it's not popular, but these polls tell us where we need to expend our energy to educate the people about what it is we're doing and why we're trying to do it.
So a public relation campaign, maybe?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Now, last week on Pennsylvania Outdoor Life, we asked you, do you have any pointed questions that you would like us to put in front of Dr. Gary Alt? Here's one of the ones that came off of the internet, and in fact, we got quite a few of them, all based about the same thing. How does the winter mortality from last year and this year get figured into the seasons and bag limits? That came from Mark of Springbrook. Gary, what do you say?
Well, we have conservation officers across the state who walk more than 1,000 miles in every county to look and see how many deer on the same route, done the same way. So it's not estimating exactly how many deer have died in winter, but you can index it as how does this compare to the winter of '78, which was one of the worst winters we ever had. It doesn't feed into the model immediately, but in the long term, we keep getting pre- and post-season hunting season estimates. We keep monitoring that, and I think it's important for the people to know that we're not landing a spaceship on Mars. This is basically trying to get it to move roughly in the right direction. So we look at winter mortality, we look at a lot of other statistics to try and figure out where we are in the mix, and we put it together, and that's what we base our allocations on.
So it does fit in there somehow?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, we have another question, Gary, if you'd take a look at this one. This is, what is your opinion about Sunday hunting, and do you think it would help control the deer population? And this comes to us from Bill Washer. What about that, Gary?
Well, I think Sunday hunting it's not an issue that's dictated by the Game Commission. It's a legislative issue, first of all, but our position on it is that if the hunters of Pennsylvania and the landowners of Pennsylvania would like to do it, we'll certainly build seasons and bag limits around it. I think some of the advantages of Sunday hunting is that kids who would double the amount of time they could hunt with a Sunday off as well as a Saturday. But we also know that a lot of landowners are not crazy about having hunters out there on Sunday, which is the day they like to have the land to themselves. So this is something that I think needs to be worked out in the public arena, and when the legislature decides what they want to do, we'll build our seasons around it.
Before we take another short break, we've got one real quick question. I think you can answer this relatively quickly. This is the third question for today. Why do you want us to shoot the older deer and leave the younger ones alone? This comes to us from Alan. I think he's referring to shoot the older bucks and the bigger doe. Now, why? Well,
the older doe is what is the primary thing that we're trying to when we give that advice, it's usually try and shoot the older doe. We're trying to keep them off of the button buck, so they're shooting a smaller percent of button bucks.
And that's a general thing, shoot the older.
In general.
Yeah.
If you have a really serious problem controlling a deer herd in your population, you should be shooting the adult does anyway. Now, if you're closer to goal and you're a little concerned about shooting too many, then you might go for the smaller ones. It's not a one-size-fits-all. You need to understand what you're trying to do.
Excellent. We have a couple more questions, and we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back with more of Dr. Gary Ault, so stick around. Welcome back to Pennsylvania Outdoor Life, our continuous look at questions you asked us to ask Dr. Gary Ault. Here was a very popular one. It may start out a little sarcastic. Where are all the deer? I haven't seen as many deer this year, either buck or doe, like the past years, and that comes from Anthony Caputo, 15 years old, of Moscow. What do you say to Anthony?
Well, I think what I'll say to Anthony is that where are all the deer? Because I had the same problem. The difference between Anthony and I is that I do this for a profession. And even in the area where I hunted, we saw all kinds of deer pre-season scouting. And during the hunting season itself, they were not there, and it was so frustrating because you go back later and you find them. On any little piece of ground, we can't say what's happening on that specific piece of ground. I mean, we're looking at 45,000 square miles of Pennsylvania, and we try and do blanket treatments over those areas. So we can't really expect, everyone can't expect to find a lot of deer in the exact spot where they're at.
But we are convinced they're there.
Well, in general, I mean, we're managing a resource, again, not just on one person's property, but statewide. We have a very large and healthy deer population in general.
Hope that answers your question, Anthony.
Well, here's another question that we oftentimes hear. This one, is the Game Commission ever going to use a more modern method of estimating the deer herd so that we can come up with a more accurate way to manage the herd? I'll bet you've heard that one before. I know I have, Gary. So.
How would you define accurate?
Yes.
And show me the system.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I talk to biologists all around the country, and I have a team of scientists look at our statistics as well. And often there's a discrepancy between what we're seeing scientifically and what people are seeing when they go hunting. When we say we have 1.3, 1.5, 1.6 million deer, whatever it is, people get furious and say, well, I went hunting and I didn't see 1.6 million deer. Well, we didn't expect you to. Mm-hmm. This is over 45,000 square miles. It's kind of like saying, you know, the United States gross national product is $11 trillion and say, well, last year I made 10,000 the year before. Well, it's irrelevant. When we give you a statewide statistic, it has no bearing. We recognize there are places like where Anthony was where deer populations may be down. There's other areas where they're up. But in general, on the statewide statistic, we release information, but that has little bearing on what you're going to see in the exact spot where you hunt.
And simply having everybody run to a deer check station is not necessarily the answer.
No, we know from other states, and that in many cases you're lucky to get 70%, 75% of the deer to come to the check station.
Doctor, thanks for going under fire here and enjoying another half hour of Pennsylvania Outdoor Life with us. You'll keep us in touch with the deer numbers and everything? Yeah,
we should in about 3 or 4 weeks. We should have the rest of the results in on what happened last fall. And thanks for having me. I certainly appreciate it.
Excellent. All right. Well, for everybody here at WNEP's Pennsylvania Outdoor Life and Dr. Gary Ault, we wish you the very best in the great outdoors. So long. Good night.
Pennsylvania Outdoor Life is a local presentation of WNEP TV. We're proud to serve northeastern and central Pennsylvania.